The HR Stories podcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories helps anyone with HR responsibilities be better at managing the employee experience. To engage with us, go to the hrstoriesteam.com and learn more about how we can support your business and nonprofit. Have you ever wondered why a company would do something stupid that cost their brand reputation hundreds of thousands of dollars and some of their best employees? Each week, management and HR consultants, John Tallheimer and Chuck Samikian, dive into the stories that matter and discuss the lessons and what we should do to protect our organizations. Welcome to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story. On this week's episode, John and Chuck talk about when jokes go awry in the workplace in honor of April Fool's Day. But first, here's what's happening in human resources news.
John, you're not joking about any of that, are you?
I'm always joking, Chuck. You just never know when I'm joking. Hey, did you hear about the HR recruiter? Let me tell you that, right?
Okay, tell me about the HR recruiter, John.
I mean, you got to hear this, right? So a new hire asked a recruiter after an interview, what's it like to be a recruiter? The recruiter leans over and whispers, imagine the oldest version of Internet Explorer. Now imagine that you have 3,415 tabs open all the time.
I think our recruiters out there are going to get that one, definitely.
Yeah, they'll definitely get the recruiters will get that for sure.
Yeah. Well, I got another joke that a recruiter's going to get. You know, what did the HR recruiter say to the job candidate with no experience?
I don't know. What did that say?
They said, congratulations, you're a perfect fit for our entry-level job that requires 5 years of experience. Which I know my recruiters get that because happens all the time. You get a manager, a hiring manager says, you know, we want someone entry-level, and then they layer on all these other requirements, and so it's not really entry level. So I don't even know why I'm explaining that, but our HR recruiters get it.
Yeah, I think all of us in HR get it, right? I mean, we know even if you're not in HR, how many times have you looked at a job application and it says, you need 20 years of experience doing this, da-da-da-da-da, and you're like, no one has 20 years experience doing that, and why would I want that job? Yeah. So always good. Well, how you doing today, Chuck? We got a little humor going. I appreciate that.
Yeah, folks, I'm Chuck Samikian, and with me is John Tallheimer. As you heard from the intro, we are the team at HR Stories. We love HR. So, well, either A, you don't have to, or B, you want to listen to this podcast, so you love HR too.
Wait, is that a joke, Chuck? I just want to make sure.
I think so. I'm trying to keep humor. You know, I can't wait to talk about humor in the workplace, joking around in the workplace. But we've got some stories today where we're going to talk about where joking and humor went too far and it cost companies money. And go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Chuck, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but there's a thin line there, right? There's a thin line about bringing humor into the workplace and going too far, right? And so I was telling you, Chuck, the story. When I worked at QVC, I come in one morning, and one of my team's cubicles had been aluminum foiled. So every single thing was aluminum foil. Like the stapler was aluminum foil. The phone was aluminum foil. And I'm not just saying wrapped up. They literally took the time to take off the handle of the phone, wrap that off. The cord was all wrapped up. The phone itself was all wrapped up. I got the humor in it. I thought it was funny, but there was other people in the company that did not think it was funny, and it needed to be addressed right away. John, you need to address this right away. I don't miss that part of corporate America. I don't.
Yeah. Well, there was humor and pranks that some people will love, some people will not love, some people will be irritated, some people will think, oh, that's brilliant. The humor we're going to talk about today is humor that starts moving over towards the unlawful, illegal, that can get you in trouble from a discrimination level point of view. But before we do that, we should talk about what's happening in the news.
Oh yeah, definitely. Tell me some stories. What's going on? I got two things to share, but you go first.
Okay, well, I will say that after a very quiet month, the EEOC has just, well, is back at it, and they threw out a slew of press releases this past week. One really caught my eye because we don't see a lot of national origin type claims. We talk about it in our classes. We talk about, and obviously that is a protected class, national origin, but there's not a lot of examples out there. And today one came across, this was a group called Total Employment and Management. They had to pay $276,000 to resolve an EEOC national origin and retaliation charge. And in this story, shall we say, the group known as Team, that's what they go by, Total Employment and Management Team, they imposed a no Spanish rule without adequate business justification to support it. The EEOC also alleged that 5 employees were fired from 2 of the company's Washington locations. This is the state of Washington, for opposing the rule and continuing to speak Spanish. And and that kind of conduct, it still does violate Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which says national origin discrimination is prohibited. And definitely, we all know, retaliation against people that are opposed to illegal discrimination is a huge no-no.
Wow, that's interesting. That's a kind of fascinating story. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the long term.
Yeah, well, it's already played out in this incident because they had to pay $276,000. I don't know how big this company is, but when that happens, that money is not covered by your EPL insurance, your employment practices liability. Usually, especially if it's an illegal type of maneuver, the EEOC considers blanket English-only rules that forbid employees from speaking any other language during the workday, even during breaks and away from customers, to be a form of national origin discrimination. And I saw it in my workplace. I was, as you know, I spent a lot of time in hospitality. We had a large amount of employees that were speaking. In my world, there were 3 main languages I would hear and see. There was Spanish, there was Creole, and there was, and I can't remember how to say it's Tagalog or Tagalog. It's a Filipino language. And they were, and I have to tell you, there were times where we would say, okay, you have to speak English. And those times were when you're on the radio walkie-talkie and you're saying, okay, this is happening, that's happening, and everyone's listening in because we need to hear. But there were also times where they would speak in their native language. They're giving instructions to each other. And every once in a while, you'd have someone say, well, they need to speak English. They need to speak English. Well, they don't have to. They're not talking to you. They're talking to each other. They're giving instructions. It's A-okay. So anyways, that did catch my eye because I don't see too many of those come across the wire.
Yeah, no, that's a great story. Again, looking out there that, again, following the EEOC and see what they're saying to help us kind of do that. And I always share in my classes, I take those articles and I share them with my clients going, hey, this is something that's happening. You want to be paying attention to this in your workplace just to keep their awareness up, right? Keep their awareness up. It also reinforces that I am paying attention to these things as well. I was yesterday in one of my classes, Chuck. So it was a essentials law class for small business owners in terms of the law. And I had an individual from Wyoming, and she asked this question, and I got to tell you, right? And so this doesn't happen often. I didn't have the answer, right? And so the question was this, and maybe you know off the top of your head, but I didn't. How do I calculate overtime for tipped workers? Right? And so I was like, I don't know. And of course, I want to give as much information to the individuals in my class, and I didn't. So guess what I did, Chuck? You have any idea? You may know. You might be able to guess that. Any idea what I
You
did?
went to ChatGPT and asked the AI program, the ever-seeing,
No,
all-knowing AI.
no. I did go to an all-knowing person, right? And so one of our friends is Lisa Smith. She is the CEO of the HR help desk.
A great
And so
tool.
if you're not a member of the help desk, we highly recommend it. It's a great program. But one of the things they have in there is a place for me to ask questions. And so I sent her an email in the middle of my class, and I told people in the class I was doing it. I'm like, I'm not 100% sure of the answer here. So let me ask somebody that I know is going to know, right? Having that senior certified HR like Chuck to reach out to and go, hey, I have this question. And so they got back to me. So here's the answer. Overtime, right? We know this. Overtime is 1.5 times the regular rate of pay, right? And so now we have to go, okay, what is the regular rate of pay for those individuals? So it's direct cash wages paid, right? So any direct cash wages paid to that employee plus the tip credit amount received by the employer or determined by the employer. And so typically that is the amount between the tip wages and making minimum wage in that particular area. And so again, I walked away with a little bit of information. I thought that was good to kind of get that information. But again, having those resources, being able to tap into an HR consultant, using a book of checklists, we have a lot of resources in there as well. Always is beneficial, right? And so just kind of it was a interesting, like, oh gosh, that happened. So
yeah, speaking of resources, folks, we have John and I did write a book recently. It's out there. It's the ultimate book of HR checklists. You want to go to hrchecklists.com, hrchecklists with an S.com. And we've recently been able to certify it for 3 credits from SHRM. So if you're an HR professional and you've got a certification, you can purchase that book and you will get 3 recertification credits. It is certified, it is approved, and we're very excited to wear that badge of honor, shall we say. A great
yeah,
reference.
I think it's great, right? I think it's a great resource to do that. My other story, Chuck, and then I'll let you get into your story, is Best Company Outlook for 2023. So this came out by a company called Comparably, and they looked at companies, small, medium, and large companies across the United States to say, hey, which companies have the best outlook from an employee standpoint, right? They didn't go to the financial wizards. They went to the employees to see what this was. And what I was fascinated by, right, there's a list, and we can add that, and Sam, I can get you that list. But it was really interesting, so one down in your area, Chuck, was Chewy, ADP, Microsoft, Google, Topgolf, Pablo Alto Networks, Workday, Ring Central. But what I was looking at is like, how did they make that decision, right? And so they did it through employee surveys. And here's some of the questions are they asked. How confident are you about the future success of your company? Are you typically excited about going to work each day? On a scale of 0 to 10, how likely you are to recommend your company to a friend? Right? And so what's really important about those questions is we can ask our employees those questions as well, right? And doing those engagement surveys to understand the viewpoint of our employees is so critical in today's workplace. We talk a lot about stay interviews and doing retention. And I think if we're not engaging with our employees and finding out what their opinions are, we're not doing a good job. And then making changes, right? An engagement survey is useless if we're not going to make changes to it. So I just thought it was an interesting survey to kind of look at.
Yeah, I love that. Because like you said, doing these surveys and then actually doing something with those surveys is huge.
Yeah.
I have one more story in the news, and it is a developing HR, overall situation. And as we move forward with dealing and understanding transgender and gender situations, there may be some things as to what to do and what not to do. Now, some people may be confused. Some people may not understand it. Some people may disagree with different things. I'm not gonna, it doesn't matter what you think. And like I tell employees and managers many times, you need to, whatever your personal bias is, for or against, whatever, you leave it at the door. You leave it at the door because you have a job to do. But apparently at this pizzeria in Buffalo, New York, they haven't gotten the message yet. So this is a developing story. And this is where the EEOC is suing this group called TC Wheelers at, I guess they're the owner of a pizzeria called Tonawanda Pizzeria. Are you familiar with Tonawanda Pizzeria? And TC
No,
Wheelers?
but that name sounds familiar in terms of the Rochester. My aunt and my cousins actually still live in Rochester. And so we've been up that area. That name, I think, is a geographical name of something up there. I don't know what it is, but it sounds familiar.
Well, the EEOC is suing this group, and this is breaking news. This is from yesterday, March 30th, 2023.
Yeah.
For driving out a transgender employee. It was a male cook, transgender male cook at Tonawanda Pizzeria, was subjected to hostile environment based on gender identity. And when do I tell you what happened? And folks, if you're still like, oh, I'm confused, I really don't know how to do these things, I don't know what, look, this is exactly what you should not do.
Okay.
So the management and employees, yes, the management and the employees harass this employee because of his gender identity. Apparently, it beginning in January 2021, one of the TC Wheelers owners repeatedly harassed this employee. His name is Quinn Gambino. I don't know if you want to mess around with the Gambinos, but apparently they're messing around with the Gambinos. And Quinn is a transgender male, and they said things to Quinn Gambino like he wasn't a real man. They asked invasive questions about his transition, asking, does she have female parts? And according to the complaint, the TC Wheelers owners also intentionally misgendered Gambino by using female pronouns such as she and her, and stood by as employees. And get this, John, I'm not making this up. This is in the lawsuit. Employees and customers did the same, asking about Gambino's genitalia, saying you're not a real guy, and equating transgenderism to pedophilia, all in front of everyone. Boom, drop the mic. I know. And so it's like, really? Dude.
Yeah, so
people.
It makes me so sad, and I may cry. My goddaughter is transgender, and knowing what she has to put up with on a regular basis and what she had to go through to be that gender, it's so sad when you think about these people just want to live their lives. They just want to come in. They want to live their lives. They're not hurting anybody. Right? I mean...
Well, here's the deal. It's not only that, John, it's against the law. And that's the deal that I just want to get across with this story. You see, he complained to management. They did nothing. They continued to harass him. He had no choice but to resign to escape the harassment. And this conduct does violate Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits employers from discriminating against employees on the basis of sex, and sex as defined probably about 2 years ago by the Supreme Court includes gender identity. So there we go. Drop the mic. That's what's in the stories this week. Folks, we're going to take a moment and we will be back with our HR story, main story of the week. Hello, HR Stories listeners. I have some questions for you. Are you a small business owner, entrepreneur, nonprofit leader, office manager, or HR professional needing to smoothly run your company and still deal with employee issues as they arise? Do you find yourself struggling with HR and employment issues, afraid that you could make the wrong employment decision that could cost your company thousands or even millions of dollars? Do you have a small or even no HR department? Maybe you've been given HR duties, but you're not an HR person, or you are just new to the world of HR. Do you wish you could have one resource, a helpful guide, something easy and clear to understand to help you get HR right? Well, I've got good news for you. The team at HR Stories is excited to announce a comprehensive new resource, the Ultimate Book of HR Checklists, available in January 2023. The Ultimate Book of HR Checklists is a comprehensive resource guide packed with 70 simple, downloadable checklists and other resources that help small businesses and organizations get human resources right, dramatically reducing common employee management mistakes. The Ultimate Book of HR Checklists provides concise, practical steps for organizations like yours to use when hiring people, improving employee performance, creating an excellent work environment, and addressing many other employee issues. To be notified of the upcoming release and receive a special discount for our listeners, sign up for our newsletter at hrstoriespodcast.com and follow us on social media at HR Stories Podcast. And thanks for listening to the HR Stories Podcast, where the lesson is always in the story. Welcome back to the HR Stories, where there is a lesson in every story. And today, John, I have a few stories about the good, the bad, and the ugly of workplace humor.
It's funny, right? Because I was just talking to my dad on the phone, and he reminded me of this story that he used to tell us as a kid. So when he was younger, he worked as a supplier to prisons, right? And so he would get to know the people in the prison and that kind of stuff. And one time he was visiting, and the warden and him were talking, and they were walking through the prison, and they were going through different of the, I don't know what they're called, the cell blocks. And so they're walking through this one cell block, and one of the prisoners yells out this number, 24. Everyone starts laughing. My dad's kind of looking around. So they keep walking. And the warden's just, he's laughing with the jokes, but he just kind of keeps talking to my dad. And so they go down a little farther, and then somebody else, another prisoner, yells, 33. And everyone starts laughing. They're in hysterics, right? They're in hysterics. My dad finally goes, all right, what's going on? I don't get this. The warden goes, well, let me explain. Most of these individuals have been here for a long time, and they tell the same joke over and over again. And so they just started putting numbers to them. So they'll shout the number out, and then everyone just starts laughing, right? Here, let me try. The warden says, all right, let me do one. 92. Everyone in the cell blocks laugh. And they're like, warden, that's funny. That's a funny joke. So they're still walking through, and the warden turns to my dad and says, do you want to try it? And my dad's like, yeah, I want to try. I want to see if I can get people laughing. They're like, all right, well, pick a number and yell it out. And so my dad says, all right, 51. No one laughs. And so my dad turns to the warden and the warden says, it's on how you tell the joke.
All right.
It's a goodie. It's an oldie but a goodie.
Yeah,
It's a family favorite.
I'll bet. I'll bet.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to talk a little about today a little further because we've got tasteless jokes, we've got maybe funny jokes, and we're not talking about just jokes, but it's pranks. It's making fun of. It could be the way someone walks, the way someone. In fact, I was last night with my friend Henry. Henry
Oh,
is, yeah,
Henry.
Henry's a black African American male, and he and I talk a lot about the state of different things. And he loves telling me the experiences he has had in the workplace as, based on his race and some of the things he's accomplished and are affected. And sometimes people will tell jokes around him completely insensitive to the fact, and they're race-based jokes, completely insensitive to the fact that he's sitting there. And he's telling me about a story about a very high-end hotel in Southeast Florida, that he worked at. And he was the first black African American to be working there, one of the first. And he was the only one at the time in the management team. And some of the other managers come into the office and they're talking about some of the guests and about their race. And next thing you know, they're imitating them and they're walking. This is how they walk and this is how they talk. And they're all laughing. It's joking in the workplace. Ultimately, my friend got a settlement and a buyout package and moved back to Central Florida. Based on that, that's a whole other story. But those are the things that happen. So it's not just telling jokes like we were telling up front. It's just overall humor in the workplace that is so inappropriate. People don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that. I mean, again, my dad's joke was, it's a old family joke, but I also think that kind of leads into, right, because it is how you tell it and what you're thinking about and who's in the room, and in this day and age, everyone is very sensitive. There's a high level of sensitivity, and we have to be very, very careful about what kind of jokes we tell, and not just the jokes, like you said, right? It's the inference. It's the way we deal with people. Maybe a prank would seem funny to you, but may not seem funny to other people, or maybe you're crossing that line into harassment. And so that's why I'm really excited, Chuck, for you to dig into some of the stories here, because I think it's going to have a really important impact on all of us. On, like, what do we say in the workplace, and how do we, as HR or people that are in charge, small business owners, how do we make sure that we're not squelching the humor, because humor is an important part of work, but we're also doing it in a way that is respectful to the people in the workplace. So, yeah. What kind of stories you got for me, Chuck?
Yeah. So as you and I talked before, the recording, we both love humor to lighten the mood, build camaraderie amongst coworkers. You and to our listeners, don't realize John probably threw 20 or 30 jokes at me before we started recording. Only a few made the cut, but he tried and it was fun. We went back and forth. But it was great. Good time. But when does joking around go too far? What happens when that harmless joke turns into harassment? How can employers ensure that their workplace is safe and actually an inclusive space for everyone? So I want to share some real cases of workplace humor gone wrong and the implications of those offensive jokes and comments that are meant to be funny.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of examples like that. And I can't wait, because you're going to have to humor me here, but I'm really looking forward to hearing this story about what's going on. So dive into it, Chuck.
I will humor you. Yes.
I got that humor bone.
So let's just start with the typical story. And we're going to talk about Mark, right? So Mark works at a small tech startup company. It's a small group. The team's close-knit. They're friendly. They joke. They banter with each other. And Mark especially was known for his sharp sense of wit and humor. And he'd make jokes about anything and everything, kept everyone in stitches. Coworkers always laughed along with him. But as things kind of progressed, maybe Mark thought, hey, I've got a future here. I'm going to push the envelope. And he starts making jokes, and it starts, I don't know, kind of like testing the waters, or maybe not even thinking, but maybe about people's race, gender, sexual orientation. And at first, his coworkers try to ignore it. Maybe it'll go away, or it's kind of, but it's funny, but it's not funny, but we're hoping it'll stop. But the jokes only become more frequent. Mark's thinking, they love me. I'm killing it here. I'm killing it. But they become more hurtful. So finally, one day, one of Mark's coworkers goes to HR, complain about the jokes that they found offensive. The HR team does what they're supposed to do. They immediately launch an investigation. They talk to Mark, other members of the team, and they said, Mark, your jokes are creating a hostile work environment, making some employees feel uncomfortable. So they did take action. They issued a formal warning. So he was upset, but as sometimes jokesters go, John, they don't get the message, or they don't take it seriously. They think it's just a joke. And so he continued making inappropriate jokes. Several more employees came forward with complaints. And as a result, they ended up terminating Mark's employment.
Yeah, right. Again, yeah, right. I mean, that's not funny. You're supposed to be telling funny jokes, Chuck. But I mean, it's an important lesson. I mean, it's an important lesson for Mark, and hopefully he got the message. My question, and again, we're not going to have an answer to this, right? Because we're not in that room with Mark and the HR people. But I want to know what Mark's response was when the HR person says, "Look, people are finding that offensive." My guess is he's like, well, who cares? I'm still getting laughs in the lunchroom. I'm still going to do it. And if you guys can't take my sense of humor, well, then I don't want to work here. I don't know. Maybe he had that, but that's where us as HR professionals and us as leaders really need to step in and make sure that they understand the consequences of their actions. Not only like, hey, this could get you fired, but think about that other person, be a little more empathetic. How would you like somebody making fun of your race, or your hair lip, or your haircut, or the way you wear your clothes, right? That's, right? Yeah. And so again, I think conversations are really important.
Yeah, and I personally have so many stories, but I will tell you, I know someone personally, and I think I've talked about it during some of our earlier episodes, where someone that I know would joke about and joke with other people based on their political affiliation, and based on, and HR said, stop it. Stop. Oh, who'd you vote for? Oh, look at this, look at that. And before meetings and after meetings, and this was during COVID, a lot of Zoom meetings, this person would have to launch into something. Finally, they pulled him in, said, you're a great salesperson, but we've got to let you go. We're done. And I remember him coming to me saying, oh, I think I got a lawsuit here. I think I could sue them. I said, for what? You're the one so basically the person lost a very, very good high 6-figure income, and it took them a while to recover. Once again, not a funny story, but we all want to have some measure of fun in the workplace, but gone too far, it can definitely be a problem. And like I tell people at times, I'm not saying don't have fun in the workplace, just watch what you say. But there are so many court cases, so many EEOC cases, I could tell stories for the next few hours.
All right, well, I'm here.
Yeah. So I'm not.
Go ahead. Tell me some stories.
Okay. All right.
Bring them on. Bring them on. No, I'm just kidding. All right. What stories you got? Tell me the stories that matter, Chuck. I want to know the stories that matter.
Sure. So here's some recent cases that I think are worth sharing. This past August, of 2022, the EEOC announced that they were suing SkyWest Airlines for sex discrimination. I think I want to say maybe they're based in Dallas. And according to this EEOC lawsuit, explicit sexual conversation and conduct were a daily feature of the work environment at the overwhelmingly male, what they call the parts and maintenance division at Skyway. The Dallas operation. So more males are working there. And multiple employees and at least one manager made crude sexual comments, including the suggestion that female employees make money via prostitution. Male coworkers made suggestions or requests that the female employees perform demeaning sex acts, made frequent jokes about rape and rape victims. And when the sexual harassment was reported to management, and this is where things go wrong, because we talk about what's the lesson in the story. It's reported to management. The female employee makes the report. She's placed on indefinite admin leave pending the sexual harassment investigation or sexual harassment training, which, by the way, never occurred. She was never returned to work by the airline or told she could come back to a safer work environment. As a result, she ended up resigning a few months after being kept out of the workplace and losing employment opportunities. Now, this case is still pending, but they will probably learn that allowing this behavior in the workplace and not following up is no joking matter.
Yeah, and so this is amazing. This story amazes me because you were reading or you were talking about this story. So you're telling me that here I am, a female employee in a hostile work environment, right? My male coworkers are saying sexual innuendo things that are making me feel uncomfortable. So it's a hostile work environment that's pervasive and severe. You're telling me that, and what happens to me? I am suspended on indefinite leave because they were doing something wrong.
Yeah. It was hell. It was not handled.
Who in that company thinks that would ever be right?
They need the HR team, the team of HR stories to come in, do an audit and do some training, because that's what we do. In addition to telling stories.
I mean, it's just that to me, I don't know if I've told you this story, Chuck. So I was doing a class, and it was up in, I think, North Dakota. And so I was doing a class up in North Dakota about employment laws with managers and that kind of stuff. And one of the persons there, she was a female executive for I want to say an auto body shop, some kind of auto shop. And so in the middle of the class, we're talking about sexual harassment, what you need to do and that kind of stuff. And so she raises her hand. And I'm like, yeah, well, what do you want to say? She goes, wait, so in my workplace, at every one of the mechanic stations is a pinup poster. Oh. Is that illegal? And my reaction was, well, how does that make you feel? Does it make you feel uncomfortable? And she said, yes. And I said, then yeah, it's sexual harassment. And just like she goes, so that means I have to go back and tell all these individuals that those posters need to come down starting tomorrow. And I said, yeah, they do. They absolutely do. And you need to protect your organization, because she wasn't the only female worker there. The mechanics were all male, but there was people in the accounting department, other places in there. And so she goes, all right, going back tomorrow. They're going to be eliminated. I didn't get to follow up with her, but I think, again, we as HR leaders or leaders in our organization, we need to protect our workers from simple jokes that may be making people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And even if we think it's funny, if that other person, in this case, this young lady here, if they're thinking it's uncomfortable, we need to make sure it's stopped right away. I'm sorry. I went off a little bit. You're killing me, Chuck. Go on. Tell me some more stories.
No. So, the next story is going to illustrate this, and I've got a couple other stories, but it's not like it's the banter. So the way these things happen, the way I've always seen them happen, they may be sitting around waiting for the shift to start. She comes in, someone jokes, "Oh, look at Shelly. She's looking a little tired." And someone's, "Yeah, I bet she was out late last night making a little extra money." Ha 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 ha. That's the type of humor and joking that happens that is going to get you in trouble. So,
yeah.
So let's talk a little.
Do you think, before you dive into the next story, do you want to take another quick break? And just do a real quick break, and then we'll get into a story. Is this a good time to take a break?
I think so. Let's do it.
All right. So you've been listening to the HR Stories, where there's a lesson in every story. We'll be right back. Harassment at work continues to be a major issue. But do you know what to do when one of your employees tells you they have been harassed at work? The team at HR Stories is presenting a half-day workshop called Investigating Harassment Complaints. Registration information is in the show notes, or you can go to hrchecklist.com and register for our newsletter. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the HR Stories, where there is a lesson in every story. Chuck is telling us stories of jokes gone awry, harassment in the workplace, what we need to do, what we need to be on the lookout for. Chuck, what's your story? Do you have a really good one now? A meaty one, should I say?
I love that. That's a little humor because this is EEOC versus Texas Roadhouse, the steak chain. And this is just a couple years ago. The EEOC filed a lawsuit against Texas Roadhouse for subjecting a group of older employees to age discrimination, including making derogatory jokes and comments about their age. Listen to this. The case settled for $12 million. The company agreed to implement age discrimination training and other measures to prevent future discrimination.
Wow, $12 million.
Yeah. Now, the case goes beyond joking because the EEOC also said Texas Roadhouse hired significantly fewer front of house employees, age 40 or older. They instructed their managers to hire younger job applicants, and they emphasized youth when training managers about hiring employees at its restaurants, and all of the images in their training and employment manuals were of young people. But the joking, well, that showed the opposite of good faith amongst the leadership team. In other words, they had all these other problems, and they might have been able to say, "Oh, well, our marketing department just put these pictures in," but the fact that they were overtly joking about age and it was documented, that's kind of like the cherry on top, the slam dunk in this story.
But Chuck, well, what if I have a restaurant and I know, Chuck, look, I know 100% that people between the age of 20 and 30 are going to be my best waiters and waitresses, and they're going to serve my clients really well. I know that for a fact. Can I just hire people between the age of 20 and 30?
Well, I tell people, break it down. How do you know that they're going to be your best waiters? Oh, well, Chuck, they're friendly. Okay. Oh, Chuck, they have no family, so they have better availability. Okay. Well, then just hire people with great availability that are friendly. I mean, that's what I will tell people. So the answer to your question is no. And I can tell you're joking around.
Yes, of course.
Okay. But
because I wouldn't. Well, first of all, Chuck, I would never own a restaurant. I think it's a tough business to be in. But I would never do that, right? Because I'm in that performance management sphere, and I'm always thinking about to me, it's like, who's going to perform that job well? And to your point, right? If this is what I need, these are the skill sets I need. I need people to be friendly. I need them to have availability. I don't care. I don't care about their age. I don't care about their race. I don't care about their national origin. I don't care about their religion. All I care is, can they do this particular job for me? So anyway, I think you have one more story to share with us, and I'm really interested because the title is very interesting. The grandpa story.
Yeah,
Tell me a little bit about the grandpa story.
Well, here's the overall concept of what we're talking about is it's all fun and games until someone puts an eye out, shall we say. It's all that.
right.
That's a little quote from the Christmas Story movie. All fun and games till someone puts an eye out. My mom would have said that. You're going to put your eye out. It's all. So here's the deal. It's all great joking until something happens. And this is one of my go-to stories that when I talk about discrimination that is happening, nicknames, you're joking with people, nicknames and that sort of thing, and how in the end, it can be a very bad thing. So this is the grandpa story that I tell. There's a former Google employee who was referred to as grandpa by his younger colleagues. It involved a software engineer. His name was Robert Heath. And Robert was 60 years old when he was fired by Google in 2018. And at the time, right, so at the time, everyone called him grandpa. And when I read into this story as it was developing over the last couple of years, he was apparently okay with it. Hey, here comes grandpa. Oh, yeah, or they'd play jokes on
badge of honor.
Yeah, they'd play jokes on grandpa during a training class, for example. He'd go and he'd come back and his chair is missing. Or they would play a practical joke. Hey, we have to move these laptops, whatever, from this part of the building to that part of the building. And they'd all show up and they'd have 2 or 3. And grandpa, they would like stack a big stack and say, oh, there's yours, grandpa. They'd laugh. It's all fun and games, right? But in the end, something happened, John. I don't know what. I don't know if why he was fired, what happened. They said it was for poor job performance. But it doesn't matter. It could have been for poor job performance because when he was fired, he remembered how everyone used to call him grandpa, and he filed a lawsuit against the company claiming that he was discriminated against on the basis of his age, wrongfully terminated. Grandpa was a derogatory term along with other comments about his age. The reason we can't get any more details is because it was settled out of court for an undisclosed sum just in 2020. And Google agreed to make changes to its policies to prevent age discrimination in the workplace.
So I'm just really curious. So I'm hanging around, right? I'm in the work and I'm on my team, and one of my team members is older than me, and so I refer to them as the elder. Would that in itself be considered age discrimination, right? Everything else is the same, everything else is fine, but that's just my nickname for them.
Yeah, it depends if they're offended. It depends if you're a manager. It depends the context. But here's the funny thing is your context may be diverting them because of their wisdom and their seniority status or their length of service. But if something goes wrong, and the term elder means older, and they may come back and say, they used to call me the elder. I was the oldest one there. And therefore, so yeah, you have to watch what you say. You gotta.
I mean, again, I look at that and I think again, is it being done with respect? Is it being done thoughtfully? But I think it's in that work context. What else is going on, right? Is that person not getting jobs, right? We hear a lot of individuals that are, let's say, 55 and older. The younger generation's like, well, how come you can't do that on your phone? And why can't you do that? And what's your thing, right? And so I think that, right, those are the things that start adding up. And that person then starts feeling like it's a hostile work environment because they're being treated differently based on their age versus based on their performance, based on their work. Right. And so we have to be very careful of that and make sure that we're addressing that in all kinds of ways.
And I will tell you, just as a little caveat to there, if that person was telling everyone, call me the elder. Hey, I'm your elder. Call me the elder. And it's a kind of a common thing. And I have that now. HR may say, no, we're not going to do that. But if the person's okay and they're like, I want to be, just call me Mr. Elder. And you know what? And you're kind of skirting something, it may be fine, So like we always say in HR, it just depends. And as you highlighted that, it's the context
It's
and
the
the culture.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's the work test, right? We have to look at it and go, oh, what is the work text and that kind of stuff. And again, I think this is where I would say if you're in that situation, it's always good idea to bring in an outside HR consultant to come in and just kind of look around, do an investigation, do an audit of your best practices, just to make sure that, all right, yeah, you're doing it, or you're on the yellow or red, stop. You need to stop this right now, right? I know, Chuck, you do a lot of this stuff with companies, and we find like, oh, no, you shouldn't be doing that. And they're like, oh, gosh, I didn't know. I wasn't trying to offend anybody. But again, just kind of putting that into that big thing, I think becomes important. All right, Chuck. So one more story.
Yeah, well, this is a personal story that I dealt with, and it shows exactly what we're talking about, how you think you're trying to be funny, but it doesn't. I had a manager, as a food and beverage manager, and he was holding, this is when I was the HR director at this particular property, and we had a restaurant. And as food and beverage managers do, they hold the morning meeting with all the servers. Hey, we're, the chef special today, push the malt wine. It's terrific. And, who are the VIPs coming in, and all that great stuff. So all the servers know what's going on.
Right.
And at the end of the meeting, one of the servers, a female server, restaurant waitress, says to the manager, hey, I better make up a name, Stevie. Hey, Stevie, did you get my vacation request? And Stevie looks at her and he says, yes, I did. And she's like, well, are you going to approve it? Like, well, you got it. So what's going on? He says, maybe. She says, maybe. She says, Stevie, I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary. I got to make plans. I really want to take this week off. What else did I need to do? Did I do it properly? Well, of course, Stevie says, yeah, she says, did I do it right? And so Stevie says, well, and this is a restaurant with some support pillars in there. And he points to the back of the restaurant. He says, you see that pole over there? And she says, yeah. He says, I'll tell you what, you do a dance for me on that pole at the end of the shift today, and I will grant your vacation request. So you know what she did?
She went to HR, hopefully.
Exactly. She didn't do a dance on the pole. She comes to HR. She's very upset. And so I call Steve in and say, Stevie, what's going on? And why would you do this? And he says, oh, I was just
joking.
Yes, that was your prompt. I was just joking. I thought it would be funny. You see,
I thought it'd be funny.
You see, she used to be an adult dancer, an adult establishment. And I thought it would be funny for me to show her that I knew that. Because, hey, everyone else jokes with her about it. I thought I could joke with her too. And I'm like, you know what? First of all, joking with her about that, that's a problem. But also saying that you will approve her vacation request.
Quid pro quo.
Yeah, if she does. So that was the, and we ended up separating Stevie, as I would say, promoted him to customer. But we did. That's a joke. That's a joke. You get it?
Promoted. I like that.
All right. Cheers.
I'm going to promote you to customer.
Yeah. John, I just have some final thoughts. I'm going to let you wrap it up. But in the end, the lesson is clear here. The lesson is clear. Jokes in the workplace may seem harmless, but they can quickly become a problem if they cross the line into harassment or discrimination. And it's important for companies. And they can also be hurtful. They can also be hurtful too. But it's important for companies to take proactive approaches to create that positive work environment and address any issues that arise. What do you say, John?
Well, I think this is great, right? And again, I don't want anybody to listen to this podcast and go, you guys are taking all the fun out of work. you can still have fun at work, but you have to do it in a respectful manner. You have to have respectful manner. And there are, there's protected classes. There's a variety. There's diversity in our workplace. We can have diversity, but really inclusion is when we respect the other people and we bring them in and they have that. And I think that's such an important thing. And, again, we told a lot of jokes in the beginning. Chuck went through some really amazing stories. But as we walk away today, a couple of things that I want to say. One, have fun. Have fun in the workplace. You can do it. A lot of places have fun. And that's just their normal thing. They're not offending anybody that's not there. And so just being careful with that. I also want to thank you guys for listening. One of the things we need from you as listeners is to give us reviews on your podcast format. So wherever you listen to podcasts, give us a review. If you like it, give us a 5-star review. If you don't like it, call us and let us know. We want to make this good for you, but that what happens in this day and age is there's these algorithms out there. When we are rated highly, it gets us out and we can get our message to more people, which is important to us. So please do rate us and let us know. Even if you just go and put a 5 stars in there, you don't have to make any comments. That would be good. And then don't forget, we're sponsored by the team at HR Stories. We have the resources. You want to go to hrchecklist.com to see the resources. That's it. Those are my final words today. I want to thank everyone again for listening. Thank you very much.
Yeah, folks, like, comment, and subscribe to the HR Stories podcasts, where there's a lesson in every story.
Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast. The material presented in this podcast is for informational purposes only. Chuck and John always recommend using an employment lawyer or HR consultant to handle any legal concerns or HR issues. We do our best to double check sources and make sure the information we are providing is accurate. We may eliminate or embellish without changing the basic narrative to make the story easier to understand. In certain circumstances, we may change identifying information to protect the innocent. The HR Stories broadcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories is designed to help anyone with HR responsibilities be better at managing the employee experience. To engage with us, go to the hrstoriesteam.com and learn more about how the team at HR Stories can support your business or nonprofit. Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story.